Hello everybody, this is TipTopMTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are talking about Strixhaven and what I think is going to happen. In all seriousness, this video was always scheduled to come out today, but they came out with a surprise announcement with a bunch of details around Strixhaven School of Mages. So, while normally my prediction videos come when very little is known about the set, we actually know a lot. And if you haven't seen any of that, I did a video covering everything that was announced. So today, knowing all of that, what do I think will happen? Well, we're going to talk about 10 predictions I have. These are some based on things we know, some are just wild and out there, and I'm going to talk about why I think it. It's not just, oh, I pulled this out of a hat, and I'm not going to tell you why I think it's possible. And some of them are crazy, and I understand that, but they always seem to be changing things. So let's kind of jump into this. So my first prediction is that Strixhaven's commander decks will feature the Elder Dragons that built the schools, which we already know that the Elder Dragons that built the schools, first off, the schools were built by Elder Dragons, we know that, they announced that, but I think they are going to be the faces of the commander decks. I think it makes a lot of sense. There's 5 of them. You probably want 5 commanders that are similar. Of course, they could be other just students, they could be teachers. They could be a lot, and they may want those Elder Dragons to be part of the standard set, but it would not surprise me if they were the faces of the Commander decks, especially saying Commander is one of the biggest formats, if not the biggest format, in Magic, so it would make sense to put the biggest characters on a product built for that. But they are going to be a cross between the Commander decks we got in Kaldheim, Commander Legends, and Zendikar Rising, and what we normally get. And what I mean by that is that there are not going to be any oversized cards, and there's not going to be bigger packaging, but it'll feature higher than average new cards per deck. For instance, with Zendikar Rising, we saw Commander Precons instead of Planeswalker decks, and they were pretty good decks, and they were about half the price of the normal ones. But last year, with the release of Ikoria, we got Commander 2020, and with that came oversized cards, a weird deck box, and a lot more new cards. I think we're going to see a cross. I think that, there are 5 of them compared to the normal amount, which is already just an upgrade or a downgrade, depending on how you're looking at it, but there's going to be more decks, and I think that they're not going to include the oversized card. Many people didn't use that. They want to cut cost, and it's going to be the same price or slightly higher than the Zendikar Rising and Kaldheim ones, but if I were to say anything, I'm going to say they're the same price just because I think it would be hard for them to justify why they're worth more. You could say, oh, there's more new cards, but they added more new cards to Kaldheim than Zendikar Rising, and they didn't increase the price there. So I think we're just eventually going to get to the point where every set has Commander Precons that are essentially what we used to get and call Commander 2018, 2019, 2020, but without the oversized card because not many people used it. It saves on cost, and it means that we can get the product for cheaper. So yeah, I think they're going to be kind of a mix there. Next, I think each school is going to have its own mechanics similar to Guilds of Ravnica or Ravnica Allegiance or really any of the Ravnican sets. And one of the mechanics will be returning and 4 will be new. This will be a slight divergence from the normal guilds that usually have inner Ravnica mechanics. For instance, I don't believe any guild has had a mechanic as its main mechanic that came from outside of Ravnica. So I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. Now, they said that this isn't just Guilds of Ravnica with a different clothing, and so I could definitely see them not doing a new mechanic for each, but the fact that each has their own pre-release deck, I think it's a way to make them mechanically unique. But I could also see them doing 3 color combination mechanics and having like guild split mechanics, or not guild, sorry, school split mechanics, but I personally think there's going to be a mechanic for each. Of course, I could be wrong. I kind of want to be wrong. Oftentimes you end up with 5 just kind of meh mechanics, and so I really hope we don't get that necessarily, but I think it is definitely a possibility. Speaking of mechanics, let's talk about what each school will get. I think Lorehold, which is Boros, will feature a brand new mechanic based around sacrificing permanents or even artifacts specifically for a benefit. This will be a divergence from the normal's Rakdos sacrifice that usually cares about doing bad stuff to the opponent and will instead focus on White's kinder nature. It will also work well with a lot of the White cards that return permanents to the battlefield when they die, which they seem to be printing a lot of. It's also them expanding White's color pie a little bit, which they talked about doing, and it kind of desperately needs. More evidence for this includes the line in their official statement, "Passionate scholars obsessed with history, they explore the past by poring over archaeological artifacts and summoning long-dead spirits." So maybe returning things, sacrificing things. I think it could be really interesting to see a Boros sacrifice. And of course, I am trying to, make these prediction's interesting. Obviously, that's not the most obvious. If I wanted to just go with the most obvious things, this wouldn't be a fun video. So if you go in the comments and say, yeah, that's never happening, hey, just know, if I would have come up here and said, yeah, but Boros is going to have a mechanic based around combat, then, you know, I feel like that's just not as interesting. And so I think that this could be an interesting mechanic. And I want to thank someone in my comment section and also someone in my Discord who brought up this idea, and I really liked it and kind of just expanded on it just a little bit. So next, let's talk about Prismari. Prismari will feature the return of Multi-Kicker. These theater kids care about the elements and are going to be flashy. You know, while this may seem crazy, I predict that they're going to return it to showcase how flashy their spells really can be, as you can keep kicking it and make the spell even better. In addition, it could add more support for Zendikar Rising Kicker theme. They've talked about wanting to add more shared themes between sets, and we've seen that with the creature types of Zendikar and Kaldheim, and so I think this would further amplify the interconnectedness of these three sets. And they have also said about the Prismari are always leaving a lasting impression, meaning their spells are really going to be big, and so I thought maybe something like Multi-Kicker or Replicate or Overload, but I really don't think Overload or Replicate are likely because they're trying to differentiate these from the guilds, and so taking a guild mechanic probably isn't going to do that much. So yeah, Quandrix. Quandrix will feature a new mechanic that cares about the complexity of spells. We recently had the change of converted mana cost to mana value, and so I think that since they made the change, Strixhaven will use that phrase excessively, and that means it's probably part of a mechanic, which, and you know, talking about, you know, numbers and complexity, Quandrix seems like the best school for that. So it would not surprise me if one of the mechanics has, you know, would have said converted mana cost and now it says mana value. Of course, this isn't a guarantee, but I think that it makes a lot of sense that if they're going to take converted mana cost and change it into mana value, they're going to do that for some reason. And so it also wouldn't surprise me if there was a mechanic that required you to shuffle. Either way, then we also have Silverquill, and they're focused on setting rules for your opponents and will feature a mechanic that levels the playing field based on your creatures. It follows their motto of sharp style, sharper wit, and could lead to some interesting designs where maybe, you know, the more creatures or the higher the power or the quote-unquote, you know, style of your creatures are, the more the rules are set in. So maybe different tiers, maybe we see a little bit of level up in different colors than we normally see it, but I think that this will be a new mechanic based around rule setting. And then Witherbloom has said to work quite differently from Golgari, so I think Graveyard Shenanigans may be out of the question. So I think we'll see a new mechanic that requires your creatures to get damage in on your opponent, and you know what they say, get your hands dirty, and I think this makes a lot of sense. Looking back at it, I would have said something like Dredge, but again, they said Witherbloom and Golgari share a similar aesthetic, but they work mechanically very differently, and Golgari really doesn't encourage you to just go attack your opponents, whereas Witherbloom kind of can. Let's talk about my fourth prediction, because yes, that was all just prediction number 3. The modal double face cards of Strixhaven will feature students on one side and spells on the other. This will be different from Kaldheim's legendary on one side, permanent on the back, and will create an interesting dynamic in Commander where you have a sort of signature spell similar to Oathbreaker. And if you actually look at it, we'll have land on one side, spell on one side, land on the other, legendary creature on one side, permanent on the other, and then we'll have legendary permanent on one side and instant or sorcery on the other, which I think makes sense for Strixhaven. It makes more types of modal double face cards, and I think could lead to some very interesting designs. Next, my prediction number 5, Strixhaven will introduce something brand new to the game that will radically change the future. It may be something even as crazy as a new phase or type, but it'll be something that has major impact on all design going forward. I know this is kind of a vague one, but normally they like to experiment with this slot. We've had things like Ikoria and War of the Spark, which were both very mechanically complex sets, and you know, one of them introduced new ways planeswalkers can be done, and the other one was just a little bit more complex. So I think that there's a high chance we see something kind of crazy like that. Number 6, this one is kind of bold. My next 3 are, there's not going to be another Phyrexian, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, we saw Vorinclex on Kaldheim, and a lot of people think there's going to be one in every set coming out this year, and you know what, there are 5 Praetors, I'm 99% sure, and there happens to be 5 sets coming out this year, the first time that has ever happened for Standard. So I think it would make a lot of sense, but you know what, even though it's most likely going to happen, I think we're going to see an Eldrazi. and figure out that something bigger is happening in the planes of magic collectively rather than just the Phyrexians. And this one is just me kind of saying, hey, what are people expecting? I'm going to predict the opposite. Of course, Jin-Gitaxias is a big one that people think are going to show up, and if you said, hey, you have to bet on this, I would bet that a Phyrexian shows up, but I'm predicting that we're going to see something a little bit different, and each set this year is not going to feature a Phyrexian. It will feature some underrepresented tribe, or maybe not underrepresented, but a more mysterious tribe that's kind of foreign to the plane, and Eldrazi is what's going to be there. Here's a bold prediction, another one. Strixhaven will not have a broken multicolor mythic. I feel that we will see a slight power down, and I really hope they've learned their lesson. Generally they work 2 years ahead, so looking at Throne of Eldraine, they would have seen the results and the feedback on that, coming up with these sets that are coming up, and so I'm hoping we see a slight power down. But of course I could be wrong. I also did leave it open to broken monocolor mythics, just because I'm not, going to be too crazy here. They are clearly going to push something. But Kaldheim wasn't honestly that bad, especially for standard. In other formats, there are some pretty powerful cards, but I don't think we really had anything that crazy in Kaldheim, and I hope that continues with Strixhaven. But then again, if we take a look at something like Ikoria with Winota, or the Spark with every card in that set, this slot is generally very powerful, and the reason for that is it's the non-core set longest, time, or has the shortest time in standard that's not a core set, just based on its relationship in where it's placed in the year. Next, here is another bold one of sorts. On MTG Arena, they are going to release a historic pack. Now, this isn't necessarily Strixhaven, but this pack will feature all cards released on Arena that aren't part of other sets that you can get from boosters. So this will include things like Planeswalker deck exclusives, Brawl deck exclusives, historic anthologies, theme booster exclusives, and the reason it's in my prediction video for this, mystical archive cards. I mean, they've done it with Jumpstart where they say, sorry, you just have to use wild cards. But this could be an interesting solution, especially if they continue with the masterpieces in draft. And for those of you who don't know, they've confirmed that mystical archives are coming to draft, and you can draft them. And that a lot of them are going to become historic legal. Some of them will not due to power level reasons, and we still don't know how they're going to handle it, but I'm going to predict that it's just going to sit in your inventory, and then if they ever add, a format where they are legal already, for instance, if they added Commander, you could use the demonic tutors that you drafted all the way back in Strixhaven. But here's the thing, what about when, Strixhaven draft isn't around? It will be around until Adventures in the Forgotten Realm, and then it'll cycle through in Quick Draft, but having to wait through all of the set cycles to get back to Strixhaven just to legitimately get these cards not using wild cards is a little crazy. Of course, with Jumpstart, they said they'd come back to it. They still haven't, and right now the only way to get those cards is a wild card. So I feel like this isn't going to happen, and that's why I said it's bold, but I think this could be a good reason to start doing that. All right, number 9, let's talk about Will and Rowan. They are guaranteed to be in the set, but I think they're going to be a modal double face card with Will on one side, Rowan on the other. Every time that we've seen them, the fact that they are twins has been part of their design. First with Partner and Battle Bond, second with both being depicted on a single card in Throne of Eldraine. We may never get to see Will and Rowan in a set with modal double face cards again, and I feel like it's too big of an opportunity to miss. Of course, this would kind of go away from the convention that I said would happen, where it was legendary on one side, instant or sorcery on the other, but I definitely think it can be a very interesting design, and they kind of broke convention in the last set with Valky and Tibalt, just for that kind of card design, and so I think that we will see that again. Speaking of Planeswalkers, my prediction number 10, there will be an increased number of them. It won't be War of the Spark levels, but there will be 4 Mythic Walkers and a cycle of Rare Walkers. The 4 Mythics will be Will and Rowan, Kasmina, which seems like an obvious one, but the fact that she's not part of the marking material is making me doubt it, but maybe that's just because she's not recognizable. She was in one set as an uncommon. The Wanderer will make a brief cameo appearance, and a member of the Gatewatch that is either black or green, just to fill out the other colors there. Here's the thing, I also believe that the 5, walkers will be representative of each school, and that each school is going to have a Planeswalker representative, and that's going to be kind of a part of the set. But that's just, one prediction that I have there. So yeah, guys, those are my predictions. I want to know what you guys think about all this in the comments down below. Do you have any predictions of your own? And I also want to ask you one very specific prediction. What do you think they're going to do about lands? It's been a while since we've had a set that doesn't feature rare lands. Are there going to be a new type of dual land? I find it very hard to believe that there won't be, especially especially with such a dual color focus set. But what do you think those lines are going to look like? I want to know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to see more content like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.